Thank you. Because we have a short time, I will skip all the thanks and jump right to the issue. The title of the presentation is A Doctor and a Woman Through the Holocaust and Beyond, the Case of Hadassah Ada Rosensaft Bimco. In every case study, we should ask what general phenomena the case represents on the one hand, and what was there unique in which the case was outstanding on the other. This question will be applied to the double virtues of that characterizes the case of Hadassah Bimco. A doctor among doctors and a woman among women doctors. Hadassah Bimco was born in 1912 in Sosnovich. She studied dentistry at the University of Nancy and opened back home a dental clinic. In August 1943, she was deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau with her entire family. All except her have perished, and she operated as a doctor in the Jewish infirmary. In late 1944, she was transferred to Bergen-Belsen. When Belsen was liberated, she became the chief doctor and then the head of the Jewish health system for the entire British zone. Hadassah remarried to Yossel Rosensaft, the chair of the Belsen Central Committee, in 1946, and gave birth to her son Menachem Tzvi in 1948. The family eventually immigrated to New York in 1958, and Hadassah Rosensaft passed away in 1997 at the age of 85 after a public career in preserving the memory of the Holocaust. We will have here in this paper 3 chapters, as you see in the slide. And we begin with the Auschwitz chapter. In October 1943, Hadassah and other Jewish doctors were called by the notorious Dr. Josef Mengele to report for work in the Jewish infirmary in Camp A in Auschwitz. And this is how she mentioned what she mentioned in her memoir. Although I had been trained as a dentist, Mengele said that as there were already 2 dentists, I would have to work as a doctor. There, she soon became the doctor in charge. The first difficulty that confronted Jewish medical personnel in concentration camps was the extreme shortage of medical equipment and medications. Dr. Bimco established a net of contacts in various parts of the camp and found many tricky ways to get medication and equipment. But the real dilemma was how to maneuver between taking care of the patients and the goal to save their very lives by making them look fit for the forced labor. Ruth Fenton, at the time a young patient, remembered. One morning in November, orders came to evacuate the hospital. Those 2 ill were hauled away for extermination. I felt quite ill, still running high fever. Dr. Ada Bimco took me aside and gave me clothes. She wanted me to join the few healthy inmates who were being transferred to Birkenau. Another cruel challenge was to save pregnant women by performing abortions and or killing the newborn. Hadassah, a dentist, could not perform it herself, but she never hesitated to organize it. Dr. Herman was working in the men's clinic, she says. I told him we needed help, and he promised to do what he could. At night, one or two nurses and I would walk the women over to Dr. Herman. He had his colleagues perform the operation, and 2 or 3 hours later, we took the women back and placed them in a bed where they would be safe. We jumped to Bergen-Belsen when it was still the horror camp Bergen-Belsen at the end, from December 1944 to liberation in April 15, 1945. In November 1944, Dr. Mengele appointed Dr. Bimko to head a Jewish women medical team to be transferred to Bergen-Belsen and to start a Jewish hospital there. Arriving in Belsen, in the midst of a bitter, cold December night, I quote Hadassah, we were suddenly alarmed by the noise of crying children. She remembered. The women went out to find an SS commander and a truck full of 49 children crying, aged between 8 months and 15 years. We gave them all our love. We had nothing to give them. We tried to console the children, and finally they fell asleep. But I lay fully awake, thinking about what would happen to the children the following day, when the SS doctor came to inspect the hospital. I decided to be 90% truthful. She stepped forward and said they were ordered to take in the children, and the doctor obeyed to the order. She then made the children to become her great project during the horror of Belsen in its worst time during the winter-spring months before liberation, beside her role as the hospital chief. And we jump now to Bergen-Belsen as a displaced person camp. A day after the liberation of Belsen, here we see the announcement of liberation. On April 15, 1945, Chief Brigadier Glyn Hughes, the medical chief of the Second Army, toured the horror camp, and this is what he saw, among other things. He found a considerable number of doctors and nurses and established an immediate rapport with Dr. Bimko, who spoke fluent French. Lieutenant Colonel Johnston, the director of the rescue operation, commented, I was fortunate in meeting Dr. Bimko and her assistant, Dr. Ruth Gutman, on the first day. Here we see both of the women on the Dr. Bimko and Dr. Ruth Gutman. And he mentioned, and he commented, these two remarkable women controlled the so-called hospital area in the female lager. They managed without any medical or other equipment to maintain some sort of order out of the chaos that prevailed around them. In the midst of this mass of human squalor and degradation, these two women, physically clean, mentally whole, calm, serene, and dignified, stood out as a shining example to their fellow internees, a personification of the triumph of good over evil. Bimco stepped forward and headed the team of surviving Jewish doctors who became the chief professional link with the British when the rescue operation sprang into action. And she became the administrative director of the new hospital set by the British, which was named after Brigadier Glyn Hughes. After the horror camp was burnt down and the DP camp was organized, here we see the declarations of the end of Brigadier Glyn Hughes is declaring that the Belsen camp was burned down and now we begin a new phase. From then on, she headed the health department of the Central Committee of the Jewish DPs. Here we see her among other members of the committee and the welfare personnel that arrived from outside. And she supervised the healthcare system throughout the British zone. Among her initiatives were screening for tuberculosis and arrangements for follow-up in Switzerland, Italy, and Sweden, and she established a dental clinic and a dental laboratory with the finances of Ort and the Joint. She continued to pay special attention to children. By her initiative, convalescent homes for children were established, and she continued to devote herself to the cause of the children to the point of personally escorting them 100 children to Palestine in the spring of 1946. Broad-minded, educated, and proficient in many languages, Bimco became a key witness in the Lüneburg trials. This was a British military tribunal on Bergen-Belsen crimes, which opened in September 1945. And I skip her testimony, which is very interesting just for sake of time, keeping the time. In conclusion, Hadassah Bimco was one of a number of Jewish doctors who were nominated to operate professionally within the horrors of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Her story represents the great majority of them who struggled against all odds and even risked their lives in order to heal and save their patients. Bimco also represents the special qualities of women doctors who had to face unprecedented dilemmas in treating pregnant women, and women by nature also were more outgoing and expressed their compassion, particularly toward children. However, Hadassah Bimco was outstanding in her multiple functions in 2 concentration and death camps and in the DP camp. Although a dentist by a profession, she became a leading doctor in Auschwitz and in Bergen-Belsen. How and why was it possible? I would suggest that her experience in Auschwitz-Birkenau exposed her leadership qualities. She did not operate just as a doctor. She actively reached out, took broad interest in the general situation, and initiated strategies to overcome obstacles. Endowed with the combination of broad culture, resilience, integrity, and modesty, she won the confidence of all the others, Jews and not Jews alike. Therefore, she became a leading doctor both in Auschwitz and in Bergen-Belsen. Hadassah Rosenzweig's Holocaust experience nurtured her transformation from a dentist to a healing doctor. It was also crucial in pushing her to her future public career, not as a doctor, but as a leader in structuring the memory of the Holocaust. Thank you.